begged. "Just fix the fence and leave by dawn," the rancher ordered, until he saw tears in her eyes. The sun was just beginning to sink behind the distant mountains, turning the sky into shades of orange, pink, and purple. Clara tightened the straps of her backpack and took a deep breath, trying to calm the nervous flutter in her chest. She had been walking for hours, her legs sore, her boots dusty from the endless trail of dirt and gravel that led her here. In the distance, she could see the outline of a ranch, a cluster of weathered buildings surrounded by wide-open fields and fenced pastures. This was the place she had been told might give her a chance, though she didn't know what kind of chance exactly. All she knew was that she had nowhere else to go. And this was her last hope. Clara slowed as she approached the main gate. The fence that ran along the edge of the property was old. Wooden posts splintered and leaning in some places, the wire stretched and sagging. She could see the long shadows of cows grazing quietly in the pastures, their soft sounds barely audible over the gentle wind. Everything seemed still and peaceful, but the peace made her stomach twist. She wasn't used to such silence, and it made her feel small, exposed, like every step she took echoed across the empty land. She glanced at the large house at the center of the ranch. Smoke rose slowly from the chimney, and lights flickered through the windows. Someone was home, someone in charge. She swallowed hard and started walking toward the house, pale. Every step felt heavier than the last. Her hands itched with the need to do something, anything, to prove she belonged here. Before she could reach the porch, a deep voice stopped her in her tracks. "Hey!" "Who's there?" It called, sharp and commanding. She had been expecting someone to see her eventually, but the suddenness of the voice made her heart race. A tall man appeared at the doorway. He was broad-shouldered, with sun-darkened skin and eyes that seemed to measure everything and judge without mercy. His hat shaded most of his face, but Clara could tell he was looking at her with suspicion. She straightened her back and tried to appear calm, though every muscle in her body was tense. I'm here to work," she said softly, her voice almost lost in the wind. I can fix the fence. I can help, I just... She trailed off, unsure how to explain herself without sounding weak. The man didn't move for a moment. He crossed his arms and studied her, as if deciding whether she was serious or just another wanderer hoping for charity. Bear. Then he spoke, his words measured and firm.
"Just fix the fence and leave by dawn."
That was all? Just a task, no questions, no kindness, no chance to explain? She nodded quickly, forcing herself to smile, even though the lump in her throat made it difficult. "Yes, sir. I understand." With that, he turned and disappeared back into the house, leaving her standing alone at the gate. Clara exhaled, her breath shaky, and started toward the fence. The sun dipped lower and the world around her was bathed in golden light. She knelt beside the first broken post and began examining it. The wood was dry and splintered, the wire rusted in some places. She could see that the task ahead would not be easy, but she didn't hesitate. Clara worked steadily as the sky darkened. She hammered nails into the posts, pulled the wire tight, and replaced the sections that had rotted through. Every swing of the hammer, every tug of the wire, reminded her that she had to keep going. She had no one to rely on, and if she failed, there would be nowhere to go and no way to survive. The wind picked up, whistling across the open fields and tugging at her hair. Clara wiped the sweat from her brow and kept moving. Burst. Her hands were already blistered, but she refused to let the pain slow her down. She reminded herself that every small victory, a post standing straight, a wire tightened, was a step toward survival, a step toward proving that she could endure whatever this place demanded. As she worked, the sky grew darker and the first stars began to appear. The ranch felt enormous and empty, the shadows of the trees stretching long across the ground. Clara felt both tiny and alive, aware of every sound, the rustle of a branch, the distant lowing of a cow, the crunch of her boots on the dirt. She thought of her journey here, of the towns she had passed and the people she had met along the way. None of them had offered her a real chance, and she knew that this ranch might be the same. But she had to try. Hours passed. Clara's arms ached, her back throbbed, and her hands were raw, but she pressed on. She worked silently, finding a rhythm in the repetitive motions of hammering and bending wire. It was lonely, and sometimes the quiet made her think too much about all the things she had lost. A family that didn't understand her, a home that had been taken from her, the life she had imagined but never had. Tears stung her eyes, but she refused to let them fall bare. She had a job to do, and she had to finish it before anyone judged her as weak or incapable. Somewhere in the distance, she thought she heard footsteps, but when she looked up, there was no one. The ranch was quiet again, except for the sound of her own work.
She shook her head and went back to the fence, focusing on the tasks at hand.
Bish. She measured, cut, hammered, and tied the wire.
Each completed section gave her a small sense of accomplishment, a small spark of hope that she could do more than just survive. She could succeed.
By the time she paused to rest, the moon had risen high in the sky, casting silvery light across the pasture.
Clara leaned against a post, breathing heavily, and allowed herself a brief moment of reflection. She thought about the man who had given her this task, the rancher with the cold, hard eyes.
He hadn't asked questions, hadn't offered encouragement. He had only given orders. But Clara understood that this was how he measured people, by what they could do, not by what they said. She had to show him that she belonged here, even if only for a night. As she worked, she also thought about what it meant to be alone. She had learned to survive on her own, to face hardship without complaint. And yet, as she looked across the dark fields, she realized she wanted more than just survival. She wanted recognition, respect, a place where she was seen not just as a wanderer or a worker, but as someone capable, someone who mattered. The night wore on. Clara worked tirelessly, repairing every broken section she could find. She listened to the sounds of the ranch at night, the distant call of an owl, the gentle breathing of the animals, the creak of the old wooden gates swaying in the wind. She felt a strange sense of connection to the place, as if she were part of the land itself, working with it rather than against it. Somewhere in her heart, she hoped the rancher would notice, that he would see her determination and maybe, just maybe, understand why she was there. Breath. She didn't expect kindness. She didn't expect praise. But she only wanted the chance to prove herself, and she intended to take it, no matter how difficult the night became. By the time the first hints of dawn began to lighten the horizon, Clara had made significant progress. Several sections of the fence were repaired, standing firm against the wind and the weight of time. She stepped back to look at her work, her body aching but her spirit lifted. Bess. She had done more than just repair a fence. She had fought against doubt, against fear, against her own exhaustion. And she had won, at least for the night. As the first light touched the fields, Clara noticed movement near the house. The rancher appeared on the porch, his eyes fixed on her. For a moment, she held her breath, unsure what he would say or do. Ace. She had followed his orders, worked through the night, and now the moment of truth had arrived. When their eyes met, she saw something she hadn't expected. A flicker of surprise, but he hadn't spoken yet, but she could tell he had noticed her effort, her persistence. Clara didn't smile, didn't say anything. She simply waited, exhausted but proud, ready to face whatever came next. The sun had barely risen when Tom, the rancher, stepped off the porch and made his way toward Clara. His boots crunched against the gravel, a slow, deliberate sound that echoed across the still morning. Clara straightened instantly, wiping the sweat from her brow and brushing the dust from her hands. She didn't know what he would say, or if he would simply turn and go back inside the house. The silence between them stretched, filled only by the soft whisper of the wind through the grass. "Bet." "Looks like you've been busy," Tom said finally, his voice low but not unkind. Clara nodded, unsure if she should speak. Words felt unnecessary after the long night of work. She had let her actions speak for her. Breaths. I tried to fix as much as I could," she said quietly. Breath. Her voice was hoarse from talking so little, but there was an honesty in it that she hoped he would notice. Tom crouched slightly to inspect the repaired fence. "Pay." He ran a hand along the new posts, checking the wire, the nails, the stability. His face remained neutral, but his eyes were sharp, noticing every detail. Clara watched him, her heart thumping. She had never had anyone look at her work so closely, and part of her feared he would find it lacking, find a reason to dismiss her completely. "This section here," he said finally, pointing to a corner post. "It's solid. You've got skill." His words were simple, almost blunt, but they carried a weight she hadn't expected. Clara felt a small rush of relief and pride.
"Thank you, sir,"
she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She didn't know why she felt the need to say more, but the acknowledgement warmed something deep inside her. It was the first recognition she had received in a long time, and it mattered more than she could express. Tom straightened, looking across the long line of the fence. "You've done good work, but there's still more to do. The north field has a few posts that need attention, and the wire along the creek is sagging." He paused, then added, almost as an afterthought, "If you're up to it, that is." "I can do it," she said firmly. The exhaustion in her muscles and the ache in her back didn't matter. This was her chance to prove herself further, and she intended to take it. For the next few hours, Clara worked under the rising sun. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of fresh grass and the faint smell of animals from the pastures. She moved with careful determination, checking each post, adjusting wires, and making sure every section of the fence could withstand the coming storms. Her hands were raw and sore, but she kept going, pushing herself past the fatigue that threatened to slow her down. Tom stayed nearby, observing silently. He didn't offer advice or assistance, but his presence was constant, a quiet form of supervision that Clara grew used to. At first, she felt tense under his gaze, worried that every small mistake would be noticed. But as the morning passed, she realized that he wasn't trying to intimidate her. He was simply watching, learning what kind of person she was through the work she did, the way she handled herself. Around mid-morning, Clara paused for a short break, sitting on a fallen log near the fence. She sipped water from her bottle and looked out across the fields. The cows grazed lazily, and the wind rustled through the tall grass. For a moment, she let herself breathe, letting the warmth of the sun soak into her tired body. Breaths. She thought about her journey here, about the towns she had passed, and the people who had turned her away. Every step had been difficult. Every night spent sleeping in empty barns or under trees had been lonely. And yet, here she was, finally, somewhere that felt real. Tom approached slowly, carrying a small tin of coffee.
"You need a break," he said, setting it down beside her.
Clara looked up, surprised. The gesture was small, but significant. She nodded, grateful for the pause.
"Thank you, sir," she said again.
He didn't respond with words, only a slight nod before turning to inspect another section of the fence. Clara took a careful sip of the coffee, feeling the warmth spread through her. She realized that moments like this, small gestures, quiet acknowledgments, were rare for her. She had spent so long surviving, barely noticed, barely appreciated, that even the simplest kindness felt enormous. After a few minutes, Clara stood and returned to the fence, more determined than ever. She worked steadily, moving from one problem area to the next, using her hands, her strength, and her mind to repair what had been broken. Each post she fixed, each wire she tightened, was more than just work. It was a statement of her perseverance, a proof that she belonged here, even if only temporarily. By late morning, sweat was pouring down her face, mixing with the dust and dirt that covered her clothes. Her arms ached. Her legs were stiff, but she couldn't stop.
There was a rhythm to the work, a satisfaction in seeing progress, in making tangible changes to the land around her.
She felt alive in a way she hadn't for months, perhaps years. Tom watched as she moved, his expression slowly changing. The sharp lines of his face softened slightly as he observed her focus, her determination, and the quiet strength in her movements. He remembered someone he had lost long ago, a person with the same fire, the same unwillingness to give up. A memory stirred deep inside him, one he hadn't thought about in years, and it made him pause. "You're thorough," he said finally, breaking the silence. Clara looked up, startled. He wasn't praising her directly, he rarely did, but the acknowledgement in his voice was unmistakable. "Bae." She smiled faintly, feeling a spark of hope. "I try to do my best," she said simply. "Pitt." "That's clear," he replied. "Most people wouldn't keep going like this without complaining. You've got grit." Clara's smile grew slightly, and for a moment the tension in her chest eased. She had been judged many times in her life, often unfairly, often harshly. To hear someone recognize her effort without mocking or dismissing her felt almost like a gift. As the morning wore on, the sun climbed higher in the sky, turning the air warmer. Clara worked steadily, only stopping briefly to drink water and wipe her face. She felt tired, yes, but not defeated. The work was hard, but each completed section of the fence was proof of her strength and perseverance. Tom continued to watch, occasionally walking along the fence line, inspecting her work.
He didn't interfere, didn't offer instructions beyond what was necessary.
It was clear he wanted her to succeed on her own, to see what she was capable of without help. Clara didn't mind. In fact, it gave her a sense of pride, knowing that she was earning her place, not relying on anyone's sympathy. By late afternoon, most of the repairs were complete. The fence stretched strong and straight, ready to withstand storms and wind. Clara stepped back, brushing her hair from her face and surveying the work she had accomplished. She felt a deep sense of satisfaction mixed with exhaustion. Her muscles ached. Her hands were sore, but her heart felt lighter than it had in months. Tom approached again, this time with no words at first. Best. He simply looked at the fence, then at Clara, and finally nodded. It was a small gesture, but it carried meaning. She had passed his unspoken test, shown that she could endure, and in doing so she had earned a place, however temporary, on this vast, quiet ranch. "You've done well," he said at last, his voice steady. "I can see you care about your work, and that counts for something." Clara felt a warmth in her chest. No one had ever said that to her before, that her effort, her persistence, her dedication mattered. Breath. She nodded quietly, feeling both proud and relieved.
"Thank you, sir," she said again, her voice soft but confident.
"Bae." He didn't respond with more words. Instead, he turned and walked back toward the house, leaving Clara standing by the fence, feeling a strange mixture of exhaustion and hope. She knew she had made a strong impression, though she wasn't sure what came next. For now, all she could do was continue working, continue proving herself, and wait to see how the day would unfold. Clara took a deep breath, letting the warm air fill her lungs. She felt the sun on her back, the gentle breeze on her face, and for the first time in a long while, she felt like maybe she had finally found a place where she could belong, even if only for a little while. The morning air was crisp, and the ranch glowed in soft sunlight as Clara continued her work. She moved steadily along the fence line, checking each post and tightening every wire. The ground beneath her boots was uneven, dotted with small rocks and tufts of grass, but she paid no attention. Her focus was entirely on the task at hand. Every post repaired felt like a victory. Every section completed a small triumph over exhaustion and uncertainty. Tom watched from a distance, leaning against the side of the barn. He rarely approached unless necessary, preferring to observe silently. But today, something was different, patient. He couldn't take his eyes off Clara. She worked with a steady rhythm, careful but efficient, her determination clear in every movement. There was something about the way she focused, the way she persisted even when fatigue threatened to slow her down, that caught his attention. Clara paused to wipe the sweat from her brow and glanced toward the house. She could see Tom standing there, arms crossed, watching her. For a moment, she felt exposed, like a student under the watchful eye of a teacher. But then she reminded herself that she wasn't performing for him. She was proving to herself that she could endure, that she could handle whatever came her way. She knelt beside a sagging post near the creek, examining the wood carefully. It had been partially washed out by last week's rain and the wire was loose, drooping dangerously. Clara rolled up her sleeves and set to work. She dug a small hole for the post, using a heavy metal bar to loosen the stubborn dirt. Her arms ached, her hands scraped against rough surfaces, but she didn't stop. She had come too far to give up now. As she hammered the post into place, a sudden rush of emotion swept over her. Rasp. Memories of the life she had left behind flooded her mind. The cramped apartment she had shared with her mother, the small jobs she had taken just to make ends meet, the nights spent worrying about the future. Each memory was heavy, but she pushed it aside. She couldn't let it stop her. She had work to do, and this fence was more than just wood and wire. It was her chance to prove she could survive, to show strength when the world had taught her weakness. Breath. Tom approached slowly, making no sound except for the crunch of his boots on the dirt. Clara looked up, startled, and quickly straightened. Des bête. He stopped a few feet away, watching her hammer the post into place.
"You've got skill with your hands," he said quietly.
Clara blinked, surprised. She wasn't used to receiving compliments, and his voice was so calm and steady that it took her a moment to respond. "Thank you," she said softly, her hands still gripping the hammer. He nodded and crouched to inspect the post. "It's solid. You made sure it will last through the next storm." He straightened, glancing toward the creek. "Most people wouldn't bother with details like this. They just patch it up and move on."
But you care about how it's done. Clara felt a warm flush of pride.
She had spent her whole life being told she wasn't enough, that she couldn't handle difficult tasks, that she should give up when things got hard. To hear someone recognize her effort, not just the results but the care she put into them, felt like a balm to a wound she had carried for years. I just want to do it right," she said quietly, avoiding his eyes. Tom didn't respond immediately. He stood for a moment, watching the sunlight glint off the freshly repaired fence, and then spoke again.
You remind me of someone I knew long ago. His voice was low, thoughtful.
Bay. Someone who didn't give up, no matter how hard it got.
Clara paused, curious, but she didn't ask any questions. She returned her attention to the fence, feeling a strange sense of connection in the silence.
There was something in his tone, something that suggested he was opening a door he hadn't opened in years.
As the day wore on, Clara continued her work.
She moved along the fence line, inspecting each post, reinforcing weak points, and tightening wires. Sweat dripped down her face, her muscles ached, and yet she felt a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in a long time. Every task completed was a small victory, every obstacle overcome a reminder that she was capable, that she could endure. By midday the sun was high in the sky, turning the air warm and golden. Clara paused for a short break, sitting on a large rock near the edge of the pasture.
She pulled a water bottle from her backpack and took a long drink, savoring the cool liquid. Her body was tired, but her spirit felt lighter.
For the first time in months, she felt like she was exactly where she needed to be. Tom approached again, this time carrying a small tin of coffee. He handed it to her without a word. Clara took it gratefully, feeling the warmth seep into her hands. It was a small gesture, but it carried meaning. It was acknowledgement, recognition, and a sign that she was being seen, not just for what she could do, but for who she was.
"You've done good work this morning," he said finally. "Most people wouldn't keep going like you have."
Most people would quit long before this.
Clara smiled faintly, feeling a rush of pride. "I've had to learn not to give up," she said quietly.
It's just how I've survived." Bay. Tom nodded, understanding more in her words than she realized. "I can see that," he said.
You've got grit. That's something rare. The conversation was brief, but it left an impression on Clara.
Bad. She realized that for the first time someone wasn't just judging her by what she said or by appearances. He was seeing her, seeing the effort, the determination, the heart behind her actions. And that recognition was more powerful than anything else she had experienced in years. As the afternoon progressed, Clara moved toward the north field, where several posts had been damaged by recent storms. The ground was uneven, dotted with rocks and patches of thick grass, making the work more difficult. But Clara didn't complain. She knelt, lifted, hammered, and tightened, her movements steady and deliberate. Best. Each post repaired, each wire secured, strengthened not just the fence, but her own confidence in herself. Tom followed at a distance, watching silently. He rarely spoke, but his presence was constant. Clara found it reassuring in a strange way.
It wasn't judgmental. It was just awareness, a reminder that her work mattered, that someone was paying attention. She liked that.
She liked feeling noticed for effort, for persistence, for simply not giving up. By late afternoon, most of the north field had been repaired. The fence stretched strong and straight, ready to face the coming storms. Clara stood back, brushing dust and sweat from her clothes, and surveyed the work. She felt a deep sense of satisfaction, mixed with exhaustion.
Her arms ached, her legs were stiff, but her heart felt lighter than it had in months.
Tom approached again, this time with no words at first. He simply looked at the fence, then at Clara, and finally nodded. It was a small gesture, but it carried weight. She had passed his unspoken test. She had shown that she could endure, that she could handle responsibility, that she could take care of herself and the land at the same time. "You've done well," he said finally, his voice steady. "It's clear you care about what you do. That counts for something."
Clara felt a warmth spread through her chest.
She had worked hard, but the acknowledgement made it feel like more than labor. It felt like someone had finally recognized her value. She nodded quietly, feeling proud and relieved. "Thank you, sir," she said again, her voice soft but confident. Tom didn't reply with more words. Instead, he turned and walked back toward the house, leaving Clara standing by the fence, feeling a mixture of exhaustion and hope. She had accomplished a lot today, and she had earned recognition not just for her work but for herself. She realized that perhaps, just perhaps, this ranch could be more than a place to survive. It could be a place to belong, back. As she gathered her tools to return to the house for a brief rest, Clara allowed herself to smile. The work was hard, the day long, but she had faced it. She had proven her strength and determination, and someone had noticed. That small acknowledgement gave her hope, a feeling she hadn't experienced in a long time. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, Clara felt like she was not just surviving but moving forward. She had made it through the night, through the morning, and now through the afternoon. She had repaired the fence, faced exhaustion, and earned recognition for her efforts. And she knew, deep down, that this was only the beginning. Clara had barely finished gathering her tools when she noticed Tom standing at the edge of the field, watching her again. The sun was low in the sky now, casting long shadows across the pasture. There was something different in his expression today.
It wasn't just his usual quiet observation or the stern measurement of her abilities. It was softer, almost thoughtful.
Clara felt a strange nervousness stir in her chest, a feeling she hadn't experienced in a long time. She set down the tools carefully and walked toward him. "Is there something else I should fix?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady, though her hands trembled slightly. Tom shook his head. No. The fence is in good shape," he said, his tone unusually calm. He ran a hand through his hair, then looked out across the fields, not meeting her eyes at first. Clara paused, unsure what to do. She had expected dismissal, orders, maybe even criticism, but instead there was silence, filled with something she couldn't quite name. Finally, Tom spoke. "You've worked hard today, more than most people would. I can see it in your hands, in your posture, in the way you move. You don't quit!" Clara's throat tightened. She had heard compliments before, but they had been hollow, fleeting, or laced with pity. There was no pity in his words, only observation, acknowledgement. She swallowed hard. I just try to do my best," she said softly. He finally turned his gaze toward her, and Clara could see something shift in his eyes. There was curiosity there, but also a flicker of concern, of something like regret. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The wind moved through the tall grass. The cattle grazed quietly in the distance, and the silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken thoughts. Then, as if compelled by a sudden impulse, Clara spoke. "I know you told me just to fix the fence and leave. I'm sorry if I've—" Her voice broke slightly, and she stopped herself, realizing she was on the verge of tears. She hated showing weakness, hated giving anyone the satisfaction of seeing her struggle. But Tom surprised her! Instead of dismissing her, he stepped closer, his face softer than she had ever seen it. "Wait," he said gently.
Don't apologize. You don't have to explain anything to me yet.
He paused as though choosing his words carefully.
I just want to understand why you're here, why you came all this way to fix a fence in the middle of nowhere.
Clara hesitated, unsure if she should trust him with the truth. But there was something in the way he stood, in the quiet patience of his voice, that made her feel safe enough to speak. She took a deep breath, the words coming slowly at first. I don't have anywhere else to go, she admitted. I had some people I relied on, but things didn't work out. I had no home, no family that cared enough to notice if I was okay or not. I was lost, really. And I heard about this place, this ranch, and I thought maybe, just maybe, I could survive here. Just for a little while. Her voice quivered, and a tear slid down her cheek. Clara quickly wiped it away. Embarrassed, but it was too late. Tom saw it, the silent evidence of her struggle and her vulnerability. For a long moment, he didn't speak. He looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time. He saw more than just a young woman repairing a fence. He saw her exhaustion, her courage, her quiet determination, and the fear she carried beneath it all. Something stirred inside him. Memories he had long buried. He thought of his own daughter lost years ago and the helplessness he had felt, unable to protect her. The resemblance wasn't in appearance. It was in spirit, in the determination and the quiet strength Clara displayed even while tears filled her eyes. I see you, he said finally, his voice low, steady, but filled with a weight Clara hadn't heard before. I see what you're carrying. And I understand more than you might think. Clara blinked, startled by his words. No one had ever said anything like that to her.
No one had ever acknowledged her pain, her struggle, her effort without judgment. For a moment she felt a strange relief, as if a heavy weight had been lifted from her chest.
I didn't mean to trouble you, she whispered. You're not a trouble, he said firmly. And you've worked harder than most people would even try. You've shown me that you care, not just about the fence, but about doing things right, about taking responsibility. That matters more than you realize. Clara felt a lump rise in her throat. She had spent so long feeling invisible, dismissed, or overlooked. To hear him say that her effort, her dedication, mattered. It was almost too much to process. She nodded, unable to find words. Tom sighed, leaning on the post beside him.
I can't pretend to know everything you've been through, he admitted, but I can see what you've done here, and I can't send you away now. Not after all that work, not after seeing who you are.
Clara's eyes widened, a mix of relief and disbelief washing over her. She had expected dismissal, perhaps a short acknowledgement of her work, but not this, an offer of understanding, of acceptance. Thank you, she whispered, her voice breaking slightly again. She wiped her cheeks, feeling a rush of emotion she had tried to suppress for months. For the first time in a long time she felt seen. Truly seen, for both her strength and her vulnerability. Tom nodded, as if confirming his own decision.
You can rest for a bit.
I'll make some coffee, and then we can figure out the rest of the repairs together. You don't have to do this alone anymore. Clara hesitated, unsure if she should believe him, but something in his tone, in the steadiness of his gaze, made her trust him. She nodded and followed him toward the house, leaving her tools behind for a moment. The ranch no longer felt like an empty, silent place. It felt alive, filled with possibility, filled with the faint warmth of connection she hadn't realized she had been longing for. Inside the house, Tom handed her a warm cup of coffee. Clara held it carefully, feeling the heat seep into her hands, a comfort she hadn't felt in months. They sat in silence for a moment, sipping the coffee, listening to the faint sounds of animals outside and the soft creak of the old house settling.
You know, Tom said finally, life here isn't easy.
It never has been, but it's honest.
Hard work is rewarded, and effort is noticed. You've shown me that you understand that better than most.
Clara looked at him, a small, hopeful smile forming on her lips.
I
want to learn, she said softly. I want to stay, if you'll let me. I want to work hard, and I want to belong somewhere, even if it's just here for now. Then he nodded. All right, he said quietly. You can stay, but you'll have to keep proving yourself. But hard work isn't the only thing that matters here. Patience, respect, and honesty count just as much. Can you do that? Clara felt a rush of gratitude and determination.
Yes, sir, she said firmly. I can do that.
He nodded again, a small, rare smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Good. Then let's finish what we started. The west pasture still needs work, and the sun won't wait for us. Clara set down her coffee, feeling stronger than she had in a long time. The road ahead would be difficult, and the work would be hard. But for the first time, she felt like she wasn't facing it alone. She had earned a place here, not just by completing tasks, but by showing courage, determination, and a willingness to be honest about her struggles. Together they stepped back outside, ready to continue the work. The sun hung low, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Bay. Clara felt a small spark of hope light within her. For the first time in a long time, she believed that maybe, just maybe, she had found a place where she could belong. A place where her effort mattered, her story was seen, and her heart could start to heal. The next morning, the ranch was bathed in a soft golden light. Clara woke early, the smell of dew and fresh grass filling the air. For the first time in months, she felt a sense of calm that wasn't tied to exhaustion or anxiety. She stretched, feeling the muscles in her arms and legs still sore from yesterday's work, but her heart was light. The ranch was waking up around her. The cattle moved slowly in the pastures, and the faint sounds of birds filled the air. Isp. She felt connected to the land in a way she hadn't expected. Tom was already outside, walking along the fence line with a careful eye. When he saw Clara stepping out of the small cabin she had been allowed to use, he gave a brief nod, acknowledging her presence. Clara returned the nod with a small smile. She felt more confident now, stronger, and ready to face the day's work. Morning, she said softly, carrying a bucket of water for the animals. Morning, Tom replied, his voice gruff but not unkind. Best. He watched her move across the yard with a mixture of curiosity and approval. The west pasture still needs attention, he said, pointing toward the fence that stretched along the far edge of the property.
We'll start there today. Clara set down the water bucket and nodded.
I'm ready. As they walked toward the pasture, Clara felt a sense of purpose settle over her.
The work was hard, yes, but it was honest and fair. She had no reason to hide, no need to pretend. Here, her effort was seen, her perseverance counted, and the simple act of working with her hands gave her a sense of worth she hadn't felt in a long time. The west pasture was more challenging than the others. Several posts were leaning dangerously, and parts of the wire had been torn loose by storms. Clara knelt beside one post and examined it carefully, noting the direction of the wind, the softness of the soil, and the tension of the wire. Pshh! She worked slowly, methodically making sure each repair would last. Tom followed behind her, occasionally offering a suggestion or pointing out a problem he noticed. He wasn't interfering, but his presence was steady and guiding. Clara found she appreciated it. There was something about his quiet supervision that encouraged her, gave her confidence, and reminded her that she wasn't alone in her efforts.
Hours passed.
The sun climbed higher, casting bright light across the fields, and Clara continued to work. Her hands were blistered, her back ached, and her legs trembled from fatigue, but she pressed on. She knew that each repaired post, each tightened wire, wasn't just about the fence, it was a symbol of her own strength and determination. She had come here with nothing, yet with each task completed, she was building something. Respect, trust, and a sense of belonging. At one point she paused to rest, sitting on a rock at the edge of the pasture. She took a sip of water and looked out across the fields. The land stretched endlessly, dotted with cattle and the occasional tree. It felt vast and alive, and for a moment she allowed herself to imagine a life here, a life where she belonged, where her work mattered, and where she was part of something bigger than herself.
Tom approached silently, carrying a small lunch wrapped in a cloth.
He handed it to her without a word. Clara took it, surprised by the gesture, and felt a wave of gratitude.
It was small, simple, but it meant something. Acknowledgement, care, and a recognition that she was part of this place now.
You should eat,
he said, his voice softer than usual. You've earned it. Clara nodded and unwrapped the sandwich, eating slowly while watching the rancher inspect the fence nearby. She noticed the way he moved, deliberate and careful, his eyes scanning every detail.
It struck her that he cared deeply about this land, about its upkeep, about the effort it took to maintain it. And now, she realized, he was beginning to care about her too, not just as a worker, but as a person.
After lunch, they continued repairing the fence together. Clara's confidence grew with each passing hour. She felt a sense of accomplishment she had never known. The work was hard, but it was honest, and each piece of the fence they repaired symbolized something greater: trust, partnership, and the beginning of a life she had long dreamed of. As the afternoon sun began to sink, the last post was finally secured. Clara stepped back, wiping her forehead and surveying the fence.
It stretched strong and straight across the pasture, ready to withstand any storm.
She felt a deep sense of satisfaction, but more than that, she felt pride.
This was her work, her effort, her determination made real. Tom approached, standing beside her. He looked at the fence for a long moment, then at Clara. "You've done more than repair fences," he said quietly. "You've proven that you have heart. You care about what you do, and that matters more than you realize." She had worked hard for acknowledgement, but she hadn't expected this kind of recognition. Not from him, not from anyone.
"Thank you," she whispered.
He nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "You're welcome. And I think you belong here, if you want to. This place, it could be yours as much as it is mine, if you're willing to put in the work, to be honest, and to care about it as much as I do." Clara's heart leapt. She had hoped, yes, but she hadn't dared to imagine this. She felt tears rise, but she blinked them away, feeling a deep, almost overwhelming sense of relief and gratitude. I want that," she said softly. "I want to stay, and I will work hard. I'll care for this place, and I'll do my best." Tom nodded again, this time with more certainty. Good. Then consider this your home, for as long as you want it. The fence is fixed, yes, but more than that, you've earned a place here. You've earned trust. And trust is more valuable than anything else on this ranch. Clara smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. Inspiration. She had come here with nothing, seeking only a chance to survive. And now she had found something far greater: belonging, respect, and a place to grow. She realized that she wasn't just repairing fences. She was building a life, a home, and a future. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Clara and Tom walked along the fence together, inspecting their work one last time. The cattle moved slowly across the pasture, and the wind rustled through the tall grass. Everything felt calm, peaceful, and right.
I never imagined I'd feel like this, Clara admitted quietly, breaking the silence. Like I belong somewhere, for real. Tom glanced at her, the corners of his eyes softening.
It takes time, he said, but you've shown you have what it takes. You're strong, and you care. That combination doesn't come along often.
Psst. Clara nodded, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. She had faced fear, exhaustion, and uncertainty, and she had come through it all. She realized that this ranch wasn't just a place to survive anymore. It was a place to thrive. As darkness fell, they returned to the house. The smell of dinner cooking filled the air, and Clara felt a sense of comfort she hadn't known in years. She knew that the road ahead would not be easy. There would be long days, physical work, and challenges to face, but she also knew she wasn't alone. She had earned trust, built a connection, and found a place where she could belong. Sitting down at the table, Clara felt a sense of peace settle over her. She had arrived with nothing, facing the unknown, and now she had hope. She had strength, determination, and a sense of purpose. And most importantly, she had been seen and valued for who she truly was.
Tom raised a cup of tea to her.
To new beginnings, he said. Clara smiled, lifting her own cup in return. To new beginnings, she echoed. That night, as she lay in the small cabin that would now be her home, Clara thought about the journey that had brought her here. She remembered the long walks, the nights spent in uncertainty, and the countless obstacles she had faced. And yet, despite everything, she had arrived. She had found a place to belong, people who cared, and a future she could build with her own hands. For the first time in a long time, Clara slept peacefully, the sounds of the ranch around her a gentle lullaby. She knew there would be more work tomorrow, more challenges to face, and more opportunities to prove herself. But she also knew she was ready. She had faced the hardest part already. She had shown courage, persistence, and heart. And in doing so, she had discovered something far more valuable than she had ever imagined: hope, trust, and a place to call home.